good Christmas break. We will see how we go. So anyway, so any apologies for absence, please, Rachel.
Apologies from Councillor Davies.
Thank you. Any further? Good. Any item 2 then? Any declarations of council's interest you wish to give to us? Okay, thank you. So announcements. Well, I suppose the main announcements I've got, which obviously get a bit more details from councillors Corey and Davey. Obviously, we had the very unfortunate flooding yesterday, which was a bit of a surprise. I think we weren't forecasting 2 inches of rain in as many hours. As many in parts of the county, there was a bit of a flood. Well, not a bit of a flood. There was a lot of flooding, unfortunately. Flash flooding almost. Although the situation is now calming down and water are receding. So I'll ask Councillor Corey and Davey just to update you. Councillor Corey on the response, please. And Councillor Davey on the flooding situation.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. This is a summary of the, the current situation. Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue received 126 flooding-related calls, and more than 60 properties have water in them. And I'm sure Councillor Davey you may have a more up-to-date figure on that. The worst affected areas being south of the county, particularly Billingborough, Belton Lane area of Grantham. The village of Eddenham, as we've heard, had a school that needed to be evacuated. The 16 properties in Billingborough that were affected by flooding, and 4 families were rescued by Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue and taken to a local village hall that had been set up as a rest centre. Lincolnshire County Council staff and Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue emergency planning, and all our partners from public health, adult and children's social care, and our district partners have all been working to support communities. And I know that overnight there's been potential of 96 properties. The village of Greatford has also been affected overnight. And also I understand that there has been overtopping the river Steeping near Wainfleet, and 2 fire appliances have been in attendance there to support the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I can update in terms of the number of properties that have been flooded in yesterday's incident, and that is now approximately 150 properties with internal flooding. Obviously, that's a devastating number. A number of those properties are ones that were flooded in previous storms, and as has already been said by Councillor Corey, there was a concentration in the Stephen area and the Leader's own area of properties being flooded. It's quite clear that the forecast models did not pick this intense rainfall up, so many of us were caught off guard by it. You cannot deal with 2 inches of rainfall in 2 hours. It's simply impossible. The systems won't cope. So you're going to get runoff and flash flooding wherever that occurs. So you've seen that in the incident of yesterday. Obviously, it's still, I haven't got a clear picture. There were still people calling in who have probably been dealing with the incident yesterday with water in their properties. That those numbers do not reflect yet. So I suspect we'll see an increasing number. I would not be surprised if it gets up to 200 quite easily. And for every single person affected, that's devastating. Many of those people will be out of their homes for at least 6 months while they get them dried out and repaired. And this is not the first time. As I've said before in this meeting, these events are happening now on a much more regular pattern and with regular certainty, I would say. And we have to plan. As a local authority, we have to plan for those. We have to think about how we manage them with our partners and colleagues. But ultimately, there has to be a message to government around funding, around flood water management. It is quite clear to me that the Environment Agency does not have the money, and they did not have the money to complete the maintenance work required after the storms Babette and Hank, and government has not funded them. there is no point spending £200 billion on energy measures to prevent climate change impacts if we don't deal with the impacts that are happening today. So government needs to understand it's not just for Lincolnshire. Leicestershire declared a similar emergency. Flooding took place in other parts of the country. Government is going to have to address this issue and have to address it soon. If this is not going to stop, we need to make that representation, I think, through all our offices in council and through the new mayoral combined authority, that this is an absolute priority for Greater Lincolnshire. It's our responsibility to campaign for that, to protect our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to come in, Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Leader. Just very briefly, we are aware that EMAS declared a critical incident last night. That's the East Midlands Ambulance Service. I suspect that it's probably more than anything to do with the road closures, which appear to be still in place as we speak at the moment. But we await an update from our colleagues. Thank you.
Just wanted to say, Wainfleet went into emergency last night, but I'd just like to thank our officers here because I got through to, I put our emergency plan into action last night at proper 6, and by 7 o'clock I'd got the fire engines there. Fortunately, we didn't have to go into a full emergency, but without our fire officers, our own highways officers and the drainage board, we would have gone into full emergency. We didn't see the EA. I was getting phone calls from the Northampton office from the EA who were telling me everything was fine. There was no water coming over. And it wasn't for the fact that I got Chris Miller in that cell last night that we would have been into major incident. So I just want to thank our officers.
Yes, well, obviously my area was probably, I think nearly all of my villages had issues of one sort or the other. And I think, first of all, that as Councillor Davies said, it wasn't forecast as 2 inches of rain on top of the melting snow, which was obviously putting a bit of pressure. So I think it was, people did mobilise, and certainly not just council staff as well, but also all sorts of other staff. For example, at Benningborough, we had the Red Cross there who were helping to man the emergency centre. So it was difficult. And the truth of the matter is when you get a volume of rain coming down from high to low areas, there's a limit to what can be done apart from trying to protect. Obviously, people are more prepared this year in terms of protecting their property with barriers and all this. But you really feel, first of all, for those people who've been flooded, but especially for those who've been flooded again. And people were saying, I hear stories of people saying, well, I've just got back into the house, got all the new furniture, and then here we go again. And it's one of the most depressing things you can do. The other thing I would say is that I would just pay tribute to all the local volunteers and all the communities. It's amazing the work they did. They all rallied together, helping with road closures, helping people evacuate and making sure that they could then get hold of people. And there's every village I visited, and I visited quite a few, that you could just feel the community running around, organised. And, most of them have had some sort of input from our emergency planning team. So again, they've got the support of the networks there, and of course they have their WhatsApp networks and all the rest of it. So they were sort of on alert and ready in the early hours of the morning to move forward. So yes, obviously it has succeeded now. The sun's shining, the water's going back. Obviously we have all the work we're doing from Storm Pink and Co. And it's taken a while because we had to wait for the consultants, the government appointed consultants, to come forward with recommendations. But I think, as Councillor Davies said, there is a funding issue. And for example, at Benningborough, that was the Ousmere Lode, which overtopped, which again is not, these things aren't council assets, but they are, we do what we can to support people. But frankly, other agencies do need to be given more money by government to repair and make sure, trying to minimise what happened. But it was an issue of 2 inches of rain in literally 2 hours. And it was very devastating for a lot of people. Okay, we'll move on, unless there's any other announcements. We'll move on to minutes of the previous meeting, which was held in December. Are you happy that this is a true and accurate record?
Agreed, Chairman.
Thank you. That's agreed. Thank you very much. Okay then. Move on to item 5, which is the main item we've got today, which is the budget for next year. So this is the recommendation. Our job today is to recommend a budget for the next financial year to go out to consultation, which will come back to us in a month's time. And obviously then the final recommendation will go to the full council in February. So I'll hand over to Andrew first and then Michelle.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. So I think start by saying it feels like 9 months since I sat next to you at the start of December, just when I gave the update on the policy statement that had just been announced. So we received the finance settlement on Wednesday, the 18th of December, and I think it's fair to say it's the most challenging settlement we've received in 10 years. A 2.9% increase in resources overall, when in previous 3 years the average has been closer to around about 14%. So quite a sizable change in the amount of resources that the government now sending our way. The main drivers for that, and to confirm which, what I said in December, was around the removal of the Rural Services Delivery Grants, a 9.4 million reduction of funding there. But also as well the impacts of the national insurance changes that the government announced in their budget at the end of October. Our current projections are that we'll only receive about 20% of funding to cover the actual total cost of those changes, both for our internal staff and for external contracts, which we estimate to be in the region of 15 to 20 million pounds. So sizable challenges. That needs to be seen against the impact of our ongoing cost base increase, which Michelle will touch upon. The report outlines 73 million pounds of cost base challenges there, as well as having identified 31 million pounds of savings across the year. The most notable of that is around a change to our capital financing, which we can talk about more in the presentation as well. I'll just touch upon briefly as well, because I think this is really important direction of travel as well. So clearly the paper sets out some quite sizable budget gaps of what we've not been used to in previous years for the future years. And in announcing the settlement, the government also released an update on the Fair Funding Review consultation. So we've been waiting for a Fair Funding Review for, again, about 10 years now. And the new government looks like they are to progress that in this new year. And I think just to highlight some of the key points in that, the new government are taking on some of the main parts of the previous Fair Funding Review consultation, which was originally announced in 2018. So looking at all the different cost drivers, there are two particular issues in the consultation that will give us rise for concern. First is this further emphasis on deprivation. So we've seen in the settlement that we've not received a penny from this new recovery grant. So we've lost the Rural Services Delivery Grant to the tune of £9 million, but the government brought in a new recovery grant, which has been designed to funnel funding towards deprived authorities. And clearly there is still a lot of deprivation in Lincolnshire, so we would have expected to have received some of that, but we haven't done. And we've seen significant amounts of funding go to some of the major city authorities, such as Birmingham, Leeds, Bradford, and we've set that out in the report. And there's a major emphasis on reflecting deprivation in the future funding system. The other one is around council tax and resources. So the government are also now talking about looking at assumed rates of council tax and potentially saying that for councils that don't increase council tax to the maximum available amount, that might be held against us in future funding settlements as well. So we need to be mindful of that in our response to the consultation over the next month as well. So potential sizable changes to the funding that will come to the county, one that we need to be mindful of. Clearly, we are demonstrating significant sizable gaps in future years as well, and our thoughts are moving towards how we manage those in the coming months. But I'll hand over to Michelle if that's okay for the detail.
Thank you very much. So as we've said, the report brings together the government announcements that have been made, and paragraph 1.48 sets out key funding changes from the settlement with the notable removal of the delivery grant. We've been notified of our allocation of the extended producer responsibility tax, which is 7.5 million, but the nature of that tax would suggest it will reduce in future years as it's going to change behaviours around manufacturing. So we would expect that grant to reduce in future years. In terms of our medium-term position, the forecast to 28-29 is set out in paragraph 1.75, and this table and subsequent tables are based on a 2.99. That's the funding throughout the tables that we've used. It assumes a 2% increase, which is the maximum allowable for the adult social care precept, and a 99% increase for our general council tax services. The current referendum limit is no more than a 5% increase in council tax. And that position sets out a deficit for 25/6 of 9.7 million, which we will need to identify additional savings to meet that, as well as use of reserves. And this deficit position grows throughout the medium term position to 53 million by the 28/9 year. Table B sets out the position of the revenue budget, the cost pressures mounting to 73.2 million, and key pressures relating to impact of price increases, predominantly around national living wage, and demand as well, particularly in our health and children's social care services, and the cost of placements for those services. The savings and additional income are highlighted at 31 million, and as we've said, a large proportion of that is to do with financing. This isn't actually a saving in terms of we reduce the budget, it's the timing and the technical issue that we're allowed to apply once, and it just basically pushes costs down the line. But it's an approved method for dealing with our capital financing that fits with the code of practice. So we're looking to implement that. We've made a global estimate in terms of our pay inflation, but as Andrew's already set out, the NI increase estimate for our own staff is not looking to be fully funded by government. That will be set out in the final settlement. We are expecting the shortfall, and clearly no funding has been provided specifically for the impact of the NI changes related to our contracted provision. Full details of the service cost pressures set out in the Appendix A, which starts at page 78. 68. Worth noting that our reserves positions also set out in the report. Table G gives a current breakdown of our reserves and the planned usage this year. There is quite a significant planned usage this year. You'll recall that Executive approved and Council have approved previously increases, one-off increases in the development of that highways provision, and that usage is effectively showing the drawdown of that fund, the use of that funding in line with the capital revenue programme that's been approved. In terms of our capital programme, in line with strategy, we've updated our 10-year programme, and details of there are in paragraph 1 and 3. The programme includes updates to our existing major schemes and also the £20 million economic investment fund to support key economic sectors in the county, which was recently approved by Executive. And at the time of writing the report, we were still waiting for announcements from the DfT around highway maintenance, which has now been received, and that will be updated.
Thank you. Could I just question on finally, in terms of we received our settlement from Shell for highway, both revenue. We've had our roads maintenance settlement. So where does that leave us now?
The highway settlement leaves us in a situation where the way that has been calculated, that there is elements of that money which will be reserved against a future set of criteria from government. So the additional 16 million, 25% of that is reserved against a set of criteria, performance related, which those criteria haven't been confirmed yet. But in terms of the net position, it's left us a situation where we are, from our estimation, about £1 million light of what we believe would have come from the budget announcements.
We obviously, because we get lumps of money all through the year, don't we? But I mean, is it correct to say we're around £10 million better off in crude terms? Because there's some grants we probably aren't going to get because we haven't heard.
In the overall position,
So the overall position, I think the DfT, we obviously made a decision in 22/3 to backfill the reduction in the DfT grant, which was 12.3 million. Clearly, this is more than the 12.3 million we've been backfilling. I think the other thing that complicates it is that the council have been adding significant amounts in as one-off pots over the last 3 years. So the DfT funding probably doesn't take us up to the level we've been spending for the last 2 or 3 years, but obviously is backfilling that 12.3 that we put in. Because of the reduction of grants been replaced effectively.
Okay, but so it'll be quite tight still. So the idea is this bonanza of bonanza to be spent is probably
some of the detail in the medium-term financial plan cost pressures are the additional amounts that you've identified as the executive at different points in time. If you want to maintain that extra level, they are political choices you have to make in terms of whether those could be built into our budget.
With the revenue budget that we've been putting in as well, we're currently spending around 115 million. This announcement of grant will still put that at over 100 million, but it's slightly less than what we've been spending. because-
We are, there may be a bit more, if, but not a huge amount in the scheme of things, you know. Okay, well, that's good to know. Well, I suppose I'd just start off that, I think council probably has to join a long list of people who are very disappointed with, announcements. And I think what really sticks in the craw is the fact that we start from a position where we all know with the fair funding campaign, we are already over £100 million behind the pace in terms of just getting the average from that other councils get. So we're sort of starting from the back of the pack in terms of support we got from government. What's very disappointing is that we seem to be going backwards here now, because obviously the total removal of the grant, the rural grant, was not unexpected, but and then we were told originally, well, don't worry, we'll get this, so this is recovery grant. So we lose £9.5 million from the rural service delivery grant, which put in by the Conservative government specifically for councils like ourselves, who have not just big rural areas, but have a population which is spread evenly across the whole area. And that accounts for two things. Accounted for some of the extra costs of delivering services over a wide area, over to a spread population. And the second thing was, I think that was an acknowledgement that some councils, like ourselves, have been very poorly treated by the previous funding formula. So to lose that was a big blow. And then to learn that we weren't getting any of the recovery grant and all the money was going to the likes of places like Birmingham, which frankly have mismanaged their finances for years. So it looks like the ones who've actually done the right thing, managed our budget successfully, are being penalised, and a blatant transfer of money from rural areas to urban areas. And it does not augur well for the future if that is this is just a one-year settlement, and one has some trepidation about where you'll end up in terms of moving forward. So I think there is a big concern about this, and it is certainly not fair. We're not the only ones in this, but we were one of the big winners from the rural service delivery grant, and looks like that will not be looked after as well as we were. Second thing, of course, is the national insurance increases, and again, pretty disgraceful. They put it up and said, "Well, don't worry, it's not going to. We'll sort it." They haven't even covered the direct costs of our own people. And we've estimated at 5 million. Haven't they given us £1 million less than that or something? And totally ignored all the contractors who, of course, they've got to pay national insurance for their workers. They will, of course, have to raise their, they'll try and manage it, and we hope they'll manage it, but I don't think they'll be able to manage it totally. So there will be an extra cost coming on to the council again, ongoing cost, which the government's totally ignored. So I'm not sure. They said no council will be worse off. I'm not sure we're in that position, actually. I don't know whether that would be fairly said of the council. Obviously, we'll do our best, and you'll see from the report, yet again, there are savings which are projected and in there. And I can't remember how many savings, Andrew, we think we've found since 2010. Quite substantial amount, wasn't it?
We're well in excess of £400 million.
400 million. So it's and one of the reasons we are not in the difficult position that most other councils are in of our type is that we have found those rigorously looked up, found those savings. But what really is galling, having done that, having done the right thing, we are then penalised even more. And those councils, and it's not just about the way this recovery grant, there's other grants for social care and what have you, which those councils which haven't actually managed it as well as we have, they've got extra support. This is from the last government before, but yet again, we do the right thing. We really do a really good job in, giving value for money for our taxpayers, and then we find that others who haven't done that seem to be getting help and all the rest of it. So it is quite depressing to actually go through all of this. And that, of course, does give us a dilemma because we've been poorly treated. We've managed it. There is this one-off saving that Michelle talked about, which is a technical saving which can only happen once. But so we are going to take advantage of that. But obviously, in terms, it's the heart and the head situation is that, frankly, your head would say, well, we need to take the maximum council tax we possibly can. But then you think about all those people out there who are struggling because the economy is about to go into recession. I think inflation is going to start rising. Businesses are really struggling, and I think Councillor Davis has often said that because of these extra costs which businesses, similar to us, but even with all sorts of extra costs in terms of not just national insurance, the extra environmental costs, the extra costs of employing people, so on and so forth, which the new government has brought in, will mean a lot of businesses will start struggling, which is very unfortunate. So I think it's going to be a difficult year ahead. And I think the recommendations are in the paper that we go out for to propose an increase of 3% to the council tax as a consultation. Bearing in mind, I think it's the pressures on our council in terms of maximising our council tax income. Against that, I said we did know we put council tax up last year, and then we did get some bonuses, particularly from the at the end of the year when we come towards the end of February. So we did have some bonuses, particularly from the energy from waste plant, where I think we got about £7 million from memory. So I do think there is a case here to say we are in a very challenging position as a council, but that the bonus which actually effectively went into reserves, we could use that this year to actually relieve the pressure on households. So our council tax increase will be about the level of inflation, and will get us through this year and obviously give householders a bit of help. I open it up for debate. Others want to say, Councillor David.
Thank you, Edith. I share your sentiments and probably think a little bit further in terms of where I see this government's direction of travel. I think rural England is not in favour, quite clearly, from this government. I think the things you've already outlined in terms of rural grants and the changes to national insurance, it's not just about, this is our budget, so we're having a debate today about that. But, the wider Lincolnshire context, you've got to see farmers are under pressure because of the inheritance tax changes, but that doesn't just apply to farming. Lincolnshire is a county of small business, many of which are family owned. So those pressures apply to them also. You can see already from the conversations I've had since the new year, businesses are already planning to reduce workforce because that's the only way they can actually manage to balance their books. They're not going to, we're going to end up with a lot of our hospitality businesses not opening on Mondays and Tuesdays because there isn't enough business to keep them open. And, this is a really bleak picture going forward. We've spent so much time over the last 10 years or so building a resilient Lincolnshire economy, supporting our small businesses, helping, the backbone of our economy to become more resilient and stronger. And this is a government that does not like rural England, does not like places like Lincolnshire, but it's a direct attack on our county, our people and our businesses, quite clearly. And I fear for the future in the sense of what will come in the next settlements later this year. So, we need to reflect, I think, and think carefully about what the future looks like and who's going to be able to actually, take the fight to this government and make the right arguments about what is needed for rural England. Lincolnshire has deprived communities. I represent one of those on the coast. To not receive funding to support deprivation in rural England is a disgrace, quite honestly. These people are, they're obsessed with their urban failed Labour colleagues, and they need to actually start thinking about what success looks like in the UK. And success happens in places like this. It happens because we support innovation, we support small businesses with ideas, we help to grow our economy, not just locally, but nationally, because we actually make the right decisions at the right moment in time. In light of all the things that you've already said, Rita, I mean, I'm absolutely agree with you. We should give back what we can to our communities and our businesses in the lowest possible council tax we can get away with this year. So I fully support 3%. I would not want, I'm not going to be bullied by some clown in London thinking that we can, they can tell us to penalise our residents by going to maximums and then threaten us if we don't do so. It's a bloody disgrace, quite honestly. And I'll leave it there. But I'm happy to support the recommendation.
Councillor Corey?
Thank you, Leader, for that. I am disappointed to hear that the government doesn't recognise rural deprivation and the higher costs of service delivery. We've made our case repeatedly, along with our rural colleagues across the country. This government isn't hearing it. And when setting council tax, we have to be mindful that many people in our county don't earn high salaries. Many people are on very low salaries. And certainly nowhere near those incomes enjoyed by people in the cities where this extra government funding is being redirected. So this government is already hitting those. As we've just heard, we know from national news that the government is already hitting those who are just about managing, and we want to support them in our county where we can. And at the moment, we don't think increasing council tax to the maximum amount is the right thing to do right now. And now, from this paper, we hear that the government is threatening penalties for those local authorities that don't increase their council tax to the full allowable amount. So my question to Andrew is, what will these penalties look like? Because this feels like the removal of local government autonomy, big state interference in local government.
Question. I'll take a bit later, but yeah. Well, it's a consultation document at the moment, but they are talking about, I guess, by way of example, under the old regime, it's about to be replaced. The government does make adjustments for the council's ability to raise council tax, and that's based on the council tax base or the number of properties in the area.
Which is low for us.
Which is low for us, yeah. So we've got one of
So we would gain.
Yeah. So we've got one of the lowest council tax bases of the county councils per population, if you will, per capita. And under the current regime, the funding regime equalises for that. Now that in the consultation document, that isn't in the consultation anymore. They are talking about assumed notional rates of council tax, which is where we've made that inference in the paper that I've talked about around if you don't go for 5%, you go for 3% instead. It would be deemed that you've not taken that maximum allowable amount. So how they do that mathematically would have to work its way through in the consultation. But I think this council has an argument to take on hearing it politically today that we don't think that's the right way to, or that's not something that this council would support naturally in the consultation, given our current funding position.
Yeah, it's just if I may, Leader, thank you. But people who are not familiar with how this thing works and how we negotiate with government. So, are we hearing then that the government doesn't really take into account the income of those people who they want us to tap up for more council tax? Because we understand that the people in Lincolnshire don't earn a lot.
Yeah, so I think you could infer it a couple of different ways. So there's one thing is it's a further exercise of central control over decisions that you've been elected to make as a set of councillors. The annual budget and the council tax rate is one of the most important decisions you make as a council body. So I think it's a potential check on that, if you will. I think the other thing they're saying is if you don't set it at the rate, you clearly don't need it. And that's the other inference you can make.
That argument does seem to apply to the likes of the urban areas like Birmingham. There is one of the arguments is that this criteria doesn't apply to areas where they want to give extra money to. There's no criteria. Why is Birmingham, apart from being a failing council and some of the others, what is the justification for giving them extra money when they're already I mean, I don't know how their council tax base compares to ours, I don't know, but certainly their council tax level is higher because they've been given permission to put it up by another 20%. Is that right?
That's one of the things they've been asking for as part of their government intervention.
So, yeah, it just didn't make any.
One of the key figures that they use to compare is the core spending power. And you know, all of the communications say that your core spending power is increased by X percent, but core spending power, the big part of that is local council tax. And they make assumptions as part of that core spending power about what you're doing with your local council tax. And it's another example of how that kind of central message is kind of overlaid onto local government.
Thank you. And I know other people want to come in, but that's only half the story, isn't it? Because do they not really care about the people that we're taking this money from? Yes, they're the same people that we're delivering services to. And they can make the argument that we need to raise the council tax because people have got greater need. But then it becomes, unless there's some outside support, it becomes this self-licking lollipop, if you like, that you're just taking money off people to give it back to them. And if the people that we're taking money from don't have the money to give in the first place, we as a council don't feel like we want to do that right now. And that's the message that I know you're giving to government, and that's the message that we want to give to government.
If we established a position where we were very well looked after very well,
Yeah.
you could understand it, but we're at the bottom of the pile, and they're just, that doesn't seem to count for anything. In terms of fairness, it's about as far fair as we can possibly get. So anyway, we will consult, but I'm not confident that we will get a very favourable response. So let's try. Councillor Woolley.
Thank you. And probably a bit more of the same, but the indices of deprivation, can you just elaborate on it? Because I'm really struggling to understand how a lower super output area, which is a technical term for an area of deprivation, roughly speaking, isn't it? Why is it different in Lincolnshire to lower super output area in, say, Birmingham, as an example? If you've got two urban areas, what's the difference? Why does one get money and the other doesn't?
I don't think I can answer that in this setting, to be honest, in a way that make any sense. Because I don't understand it myself. In a way that I can explain it simply, if that makes sense. We can do some work on it to help furnish the consultation. I think that's probably the best way to do it. But
would you say that's more of a political decision then?
Yeah, I've got to be careful, I
Yeah.
guess, in terms of my response. In the conversations that we've had on the day of the settlement and with the leaders, with my portfolio holder, I think rated by what happened. I think it's as much as I can say.
I mean, I think
Okay, well, what
what happens, just before we carry on, is people dive into the technical, should this bit of the formula be this and should it be that? Should that be raised? And obviously every council and every government looks at that. But I believe, let's just look at the whole, what we get overall.
Yes,
And
yes.
is that, and we get a lot less than the average. So that to me is quite simple, that it suits a lot of people to make this more complicated than should be. But sorry, carry on.
Yes. I think for me, I completely agree with you, Leader. It's just the fact that it just feels that we have formulas which are used all over the country for deprivation, and yet it feels, maybe I'm wrong, but it just feels as though the same when you've got a similar area, that it's not
Well,
being.
It's quite simple. It's not complicated.
No.
Basically, what the Labour government is doing is finding excuses to take money from rural, what they think are non-Labour areas, and give it to what they think of their areas. That's what they did when they were last in government, and it's quite a blatant political move, actually. So there's no pretense it's anything else. So Andrew will struggle to, but it's just they're looking for excuses, and they've done it before, and I'm afraid we're in for a tough time for the next however long this government lasts. So, as always, we will have to manage, but as always, our residents will have to pay more, will have to get fewer services from what they pay for their council tax than they would in places like London or places like Birmingham, for example. So it is galling, it is really
It
galling.
is, it really is.
Okay, anybody else would like to go?
No.
Yes, sorry, Dan. Councillor.
Just a question on the resetting the business rate system. Is that resetting it as in the allocation of what the council will be seeing, or is there something down the line of actually reviewing the whole business rates?
So there'll be two elements to that, which will come out of the fair funding review. So at the moment, we get, again, it's linked to formula. We get a set figure from the government, which we're expected to collect in any given year, which is based on formula and need as part of the review. There's also as well, we get an annual top up of a few £1 million, which we set out in the report. And that's at risk as well as part of a reset, because the idea is to move that money around the system as well. So there's layers and layers and layers of risk through this next fair funding
I think
review.
the other thing to mention is obviously business rates polling that we've so we have a set level of business rates that we poll with the districts. So if was collected, we jointly benefit from that. And that's obviously a big part of that as well. So that's another risk around business rates polling.
I just wonder, Martin, obviously the disappointment was that the government has the reforms to NHS social care funding apparently have been kicked into the very long grass. So in terms of financial pressures in future, where do you think that leaves us and the government?
Yeah, so as you say, the government has made quite significant announcements on Friday. They did announce some additional money for adult social care, but we need to be really clear, not a single penny of that will come to Lincolnshire County Council. It's all disabled facilities grant, which will go to the districts. It's a national formula. There's no flexibility on that. And as I say, an independent commission set up. I think there's as a sector, we welcome the commission. It's just we are very concerned about the duration that Baroness Casey is due to provide an interim report in a year's time and a final report in 2028. Whereas we note that the NHS plan, the NHS 10-year plan, is due to be published in April. So we're left somewhat behind. We are in the position where we are seeing significant increase in the number of people with mental health issues who are relying on social care, and we're seeing significant increases in complexity, particularly in working age adults with learning disability. So although people will often look at adult social care and think of us as a service for older people getting them out of hospital, we, like every other authority in the country, in fact, adult social care is now predominantly for working age adults who are have either a lifelong disability or who have developed a very long-standing disability during the course of their lives. And that's the area where we're seeing the biggest pressure. And of course, the national insurance changes that have been mentioned have a particular impact on areas where staff work part-time and are relatively low paid. And that almost is the definition of adult social care. We probably have more low-paid part-time workers working in adult social care than any other part of the economy. And of course, therefore, that impact is particularly concentrated in the adult social care world, and a very large proportion of adult social care is for and therefore it feels the providers can't, will no doubt put up their prices for self-funders, but a fair chunk of that will inevitably come to the local authority. And we are seeing, again, like every other council in the country, we're seeing more and more people are running out of their own resource. So self-funders deplete their capital and then come onto the books for the local authority.
So in summary, that there will be huge cost pressures going forward because without the reforms, which would have alleviated some of the question, but of course we'll just have to. Well, I think for the government, which where it's got to find a lot of money somehow, isn't it? So we can't find it. So it's going to be, I think as the years go by, it's going to be a massive problem for the government to try and find the money to do this. So yeah, I was quite surprised really when I thought the government with a big majority could take some of those tough necessary decisions. But anyway, there we go. Okay, right then. So unless anybody else has got anything to add, we shall move to a recommendation which are on page 18, which basically approves the budget proposal and it's all there. There's recommendations 1 to 4 to go out of consultation effectively. And they'll see following that, it will come back to this executive in a month's time. And we'll make a final recommendation in the light of that consultation. So all those in favour of the recommendations, please now indicate. I think that's unanimous. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. We'll see what consultation tells us when it comes. Okay, then we'll move on then to item 6, which is the final report from Young Carers Scope Review. I understand Councillor Dilks is here, who will chair this review. So welcome, Phil. Come and join us, please. Do you want to introduce it, Councillor Bradwell, and then we can go forward from there? Oh, there's a whole lot of it. A team.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So this is obviously, as you said, the report on young carers. Actually, I have to admit, we've never actually done such an extensive report on young carers. It is a really good report. Thank you to everyone who was involved in the work, Phil, and I know you had a small team in that. So yes, so thank you very much. But I'll let Phil, you start or give us a resume.
Very happy to.
Yes,
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, but thank you very much.
No, thank you. And good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure, I have to say, to present to you on behalf of Scrutiny Panel A a report into the provision that the County Council now offers to young carers and us looking at just how it might be improved in any way. I start with a confession, I have to say. Despite serving as an elected councillor for more than a quarter of a century, before we started our work on this review, some 9 months ago, I knew nothing at all about the contribution so many young carers make, nor how their lives are affected and shaped by their experience of being relied on to care for a loved one at home, usually a relative. So for me, and I know for cross-party colleague members of the panel, it really has been an invaluable education, and I thank you for allowing us to do it. Just learning that across our county, there's an estimated 7,000 young people, some as young as 5 or 6 years old, actually taking responsibility for caring for a parent, a brother or a sister, who for whatever reason may be struggling with physical or mental disability, perhaps even addiction to drugs or alcohol. And these children, young people, sort of take on this responsibility before they go to school often. It has an impact on their education and their whole life chances. And so I think it is right that we sort of care for them. And I have to say, although I say the 7,000, less than half of that number are actually identified who we actually know, are the young carers. So actually identifying some of the others, or a bigger proportion, is part of the challenge. I personally won't forget meeting the young lad who told me he was often late for school because of caring duties at home, but he kept the reason for his lateness secret, not just from the school, but even from his own mates, because they just wouldn't understand, the difference in his life that he has. So he didn't tell them. And that was the same reason he wouldn't go to the lunchtime meetings that the school organised for young carers, because he would be different. And the kids, the other kids, they can be cruel, can't they, kids? As a granddad, I know that. And for the same reason, he couldn't have birthday parties at home, because he was different, and he couldn't have sleepovers that my kids had when they were young. So he wasn't like other kids. And I won't forget the academically gifted teenager, young lady, who told me she didn't think she would be able to go to university like her friends were doing, because she was needed at home to look after her mum. And I do remember her moving words. She actually said, "My mum brought me into this world and she cared for me when I was a baby. Now it's my turn to look after her." Just think, wow, you know, the impact on that young lady's life. One carer said to me, we just want someone to understand what we're going through. Even though in that person's school, they'd got a person was responsible for looking after the young carers. But that wasn't enough. I will say, if I may, at the start, this is not a damning report. Far from it, quite the reverse. The panel, we quickly established through our research that Lincolnshire Children's Services is already ahead of the curve, we think, in the support that we offer, that the County Council offers, those who we managed to identify as young carers. So our focus was on how best the County Council could perhaps build on what the research told us was already a strong base. We recognise the excellent support provided by Jo Cabinet, our Assistant Director for Early Help, and our excellent team of officers, some of whom are here today. Thank you, Jo, for guiding the panel on what really has, as I say, been in education. I'd also like to thank the Vice Chairman of the panel, Councillor Tracy Carter, and the panel members, Councillor Debbie Armiger, Noyce and Mark Whittington, for their work on this review, as well as Senior Scrutiny Officer Tracy Johnson. Most importantly, on behalf of the panel, our heartfelt thanks go to the young carers and staff we were able to meet and learn from when we visited regular young carers activities across the county. Our report recognises the challenges facing the Children's Services team in identifying young carers and raising awareness of the support offer that is already available. But we do feel that the amount of information about what is available is actually very limited, and that media coverage and other available information channels need to be improved, not just so young carers themselves can find out what's available and take advantage of it, but also to raise public awareness of the value of the work that these young people do for us. We believe there's a real need to tackle the stigma attached that many young carers feel about their special role, and to address the misconceptions and unfounded fears that some families may have if their child is identified as a young carer. I.e. they might worry, oh, the child will be taken into care, which is not the case. We're there to support them. In total, we make 12 recommendations with the overall aim of improving service consistency across Lincolnshire and collaboration with the community of practice and partner agencies. You'll see in the report that I won't go into all of them, but you'll see some recommendations focus on health partnerships and safeguarding partnerships for adults and children, and encouraging other agencies to raise the profile of young carers. All of our recommendations follow the themes of improving messaging to promote the County Council's offer. We believe staff awareness and knowledge in relation to the challenges and support for young carers could benefit by developing a closer community of best practice through health and safeguarding partnerships. 5 of our recommendations address the need to increase the identification of young carers and to tackle the stigma and misconceptions I mentioned. We believe and we recommend that establishing a Young Carers Council would give young carers a better voice, an improved voice, and we believe that this would encourage young carers themselves to become more involved in shaping and improving the service that we offer to them. We think there's room on the County Council's website and in our social media to further champion the value of young carers. We recommend closer working with, as I say, our partner agencies to create a joint communication strategy to promote support for young carers, which could involve and should involve feedback from a young carers survey, to be a young carers survey. And we also believe that a consistent welcome to support message is extended to all young carers once they are identified as such. Finally, but most importantly, may I say, I believe all of us, whether staff or officers or county councillors, have a role to play in learning more about the County Council's offer to young carers and the work that they do, and promoting it within our constituencies, within our wards and divisions. Perhaps we might even consider and I spoke to Tricia this morning just about this, actually putting something on young carers in the induction and training programme for new councillors following the elections later this year. Leader, I'll stop there, but in conclusion, may I commend this report to you and your executive. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for a very thorough report. And as you said, although it is clear from this comprehensive report, we do quite a good job at the county council, but we could always do better. And like yourself, there's a lot of stuff going on there, which probably most of us as councillors were only vaguely aware of. I think you've done a really positive job in terms of highlighting this very issue where there are lots of young people who are young carers who are doing sterling work, but also disrupting their lives. So I think it's a good, and the recommendations are very thorough. So any contributions, comments, please? Councillor Kendall.
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, I'd just like to comment from the point of view of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. And personally, I was delighted when this topic was chosen for having come across young carers when I was dealing with voluntary organisations during my time in the NHS. So I had some awareness, but obviously this has really informed me fantastically. As at our meeting last month, or rather on the 6th of December, we unanimously approved actually the draft final report for submitting to the meeting today. And as Councillor Wilkes has said, we were amazed to learn that there were 7,000 young carers, and the case studies that he's outlined today were outlined to the committee meeting, and I think that struck home with many people. And we did note at the meeting that we already provide very good quality service at the county council, which is very reassuring. But we were aware of the impact of young carers' lives in having to care for parents or siblings at the sort of formative stage of their life. So anything that could be done to support them, which is why we proposed that the council should provide some funded activities. And we're well aware, obviously, the current financial situation, but it could be examined. And I understand that the executive director, of course, agreed to investigate and review the commitment that might be required to support young people additionally. And an update actually on this proposal being included in the Young Carer Scrutiny Review Executive Reports and Action Plan that's due to be considered by the Children's Committee on the 7th of March this year. But I certainly personally welcomed the investigation. It is something which is under the radar for many people and council colleagues as well. And I certainly support the suggestion Councillor Wilkes made that something is included in induction for new councillors after the elections in May. Thank you, Linda.
Very much. Just in terms of, as Councillor Dill said about what sort of loneliness, presumably social isolation, because we do support. I'm just interested in the social media side of it, because I know, and Councillor Dill's talked about sort of the concern about being not publicising that they are doing the care. So could you just Heather, what we currently do in terms of, because obviously social media would be one way we could actually have help people and support them. What we do now and what possibly how else we could step that up.
Especially because she leads on this area for us.
This is why you're here, Hannah.
Thank you. As far as the social media, we can't do a lot really because of various rules and expectations. Facebook is one of the main methods we use, but as probably lots of people around this room know, it's not a very well used.
Terminology was faulty, not social media. It's really about using digital technology to engage individually with people, or in groups if they so wish. Sorry, terminology I used was wrong.
Oh, okay. We utilize when we're dealing directly with our young people, our young carers. Is that what you want to understand better?
Yeah, currently, how are we promoting awareness of young carers?
So you're a carer on your own and you don't really want to talk to your mates just for camp. So, but what you could do is in a forum of some description, physical or digital, you could talk to people, share experiences, and just feel you've got a network of support around you.
Yeah, we do have local WhatsApp groups that the young carers have really embraced, especially post-COVID, which has allowed them to share different parts of their lives with other young carers, which is really positive. One of the things that we do really, really well in Lincolnshire is the work with our partners and especially with our schools, because we know that our schools and education providers in general get to know these young people in very different ways than the rest of us do. So it's about so we have worked really hard to upskill them to recognize and understand and ask the right questions for these young people. And then one of the key things about young carers is that you can't put them into a box. Everyone's different. Every experience they have caring for whomever they're caring for is different. So it's about understanding from each individual child, young person, what they need and what is going to help them. So it's been about upskilling our schools especially, but more of our partners to ask those right questions and then understand what's going to enhance their life. So for some of these young people, it's about coming together as young people, getting a bit of a break, a caring role. Some of them just want to be able to share and text each other. Some of them want to be left alone for their caring responsibilities and be checked on every now and again. But that's been the focus. Absolutely. It's about, and this is a lot of the discussion we've been having with our scrutiny members, which has been really wonderful, and understanding each child is an individual and that we need to engage with them in their own sort of bespoke way. I hope that answered your question.
And if I could just add, I think where we want to go further, Leader, is that what we'd like to do through the work of the scrutiny panel is to really start to address some of those misconceptions. So there can be a worry that if the county council gets involved with your children, that's about safeguarding them rather than supporting. And so it's about how So what we want to do is to do some promotional material across our partners that says this is what a young carer is. And this is what our offer is, and this is what your school can do. And there might be groups in your area, do get in touch with us. And it dispels any myths that just because children's services want to support your child with a young carer role, as Councillor Dilk said, that's not a suggestion that we are there because those children aren't being utterly well cared for and loved. It's about that additional responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, it is about supporting independence.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. You don't give them what you think they need, give them what they think they need.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's COVID. It was really, really interesting because we thought these kids wanted to come out and have that break and be in a group. And they said, actually, being in COVID and getting to introduce their parents or their siblings or whomever, show them around their homes virtually. They really, really appreciated that. These young carers, as much as their lives are different than their peers who don't have any young care, very proud of what they do and the contribution they make to their families. And it can be very easy for us to assume that the caring is wrong in some way. But like I say, they're very proud of what they do. They want to recognize, they want to be recognized, and most of them want to be recognized, but they don't necessarily want those caring responsibilities taken away. It's just, and some of the conversations we have been working with our adult services colleagues and other partners about just making sure that balance is right for these young people.
Yes, Councillor.
Very good. And I'm a bit like you. I didn't really know a great deal about it. In terms of when we get to obviously some authorities are till 25, some are 18. What happens after that? Is it sort of a gradual progression off, or is it cut off, or?
There is.
They're carers, so
yeah,
they're not cared for.
No. But obviously,
they can. Well, it can be. They do it for decades.
No. But what I'm saying,
One of the things that we're particularly proud of and that we do really well is that transition from being a young carer to an adult carer and into the adult care service. So there is really regular checking in, looking at what that is, and hand-holding, for want of a better term, these young people into the adults caring service so that they can have an assessment as adults who are providing care in their own right. But this is something that Children's Services and Adult Services, that transition that we do particularly well, I believe.
So that is,
Karen.
what age?
We start that transition at 16. So we start having those conversations. And then as Children's Services, we support them until 18 and then they cross. But it's looking at that and keying that up and making sure that they have that best support that's provided by the adult carers team.
Just again to say, Councillor McNally, the caring duties can range from having a disabled sibling, so you have a different life and you're involved a little bit on the edge of that care, through to more significant caring. So some of these children will become full-time adult carers for their families, and some of them will not ever have that kind of need or want to do that. So the transition is very different depending on, and we don't put a threshold in on the young carer. You know, we look very carefully at what they're doing and we support them.
Yeah, as long as there's support there, we don't travel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think just worth underlining, just as has been said, I mean, we've got 7,000 young carers is a very large number. There are very significantly more adult carers across the county, and therefore we have a well-established and significant programme to support adult carers. And obviously, as Alice said, the process of transitioning young carers where it is appropriate for them to be an adult carer, because as Heather said, quite a lot of young carers don't become adult carers. But where they do have caring responsibilities as an adult, we have well-established processes, and there are statutory entitlements and a range of support services available to them. It's a very major part of the wider social care system.
So in terms of when the caring stops for whatever reason, what support and advice do you give to people? For example, somebody's had their education interrupted, or because obviously then they will not. They've got to, you'd hope that they will all go and get good jobs or whatever. So in terms of education and support and advice in terms of future career options, what happens there?
So schools do an awful lot of that.
But when they
So once they've left school, that would be.
Yeah, I mean, if they're adult carers, then for just about, it is a normal experience that for an adult carer they will stop being a carer at some point because of a range of things. And therefore part of the adult care, the service for adult carers is that transition of when they stop being a carer to help them into a new life. Now, the amount of resource we have to support people to go into education or to go into employment is quite limited, but there is support in terms of the helping people to plan and work through and emotionally. That's often the biggest part of it, to help them move from being a carer to no longer being a carer is an important part of the service.
Okay, any Councillor David?
Just thank you, Lee. You actually raised something I was going to ask you. I'll come back to that in a moment, Martin, if that's okay. Firstly, thank you to the scrutiny panel. I think it's a very good report. I think it touches on an issue, I suspect, which is even wider. The numbers we talk about today, 7,000, I suspect there's more people out there, particularly young people. And I know from the coast, because as you will be aware, we have a lot of challenging issues relating to the coast, that there are a lot of kids looking after, it's not single parent families where the parent needs support and help, and kids are taking on that role. So I am very concerned about how we help them transition. You start when you're 7-8 years old looking after your mum because she's on her own, she's got problems, and they keep doing that until say 22, 23 and the parent dies. How do we support them? I mean, as you've just said, Martin, resources are limited. I think there is a real issue. I've run across one or two people in my own area over the years who've really struggled with making that readjustment. They feel lost, completely lost. They've got no ability to reconnect. But I think that's an issue that we ought to focus on going forward. I think we do a fantastic job here, which let's be clear. But we can always do more, as the leader has said. And this is an issue that is really important. It connects what we do as councillors and the council to our communities in a very real and very emotional way. And, we should not forget that, and we should do everything we can to make it better in the future. So I commend the report, but I think we should keep, I think we should certainly train the new council in terms of this issue. And I certainly think in terms of the work officers do, what more can we physically really do to support those that often drop through the cracks because we don't have resources? Is there something more that can be done in the wider support network?
Yeah.
So those are questions for the future. You can't answer them today because you're already. Yeah.
And part of the recommendations from the scrutiny committee are that we look at those multi-agency partnership work. And so what we'll be doing is we'll be reporting back to Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee in 6 months about that work to see where we've got to, what we've found. And so if you're happy with those recommendations, we'll move our reporting back via the Children's Committee in terms of those developments.
From the adults side.
Well, I'm very happy, obviously, talking to Councillor Burkett to look at what services are that we provide for adult carers who stopped being adult carers, exactly the issue that Councillor Davies has been raising, to see what we do now and what the scope would be to improve that.
Thank you.
Councillor Burkett, yeah, and then I'll let Joe, sorry.
Right, yeah, I think it's not only children's, but it is adult carers as well, because adult carers fall through gaps as well. You can have somebody who's I don't know, 89, still looking after their elderly wife, or vice versa, and they depend on that person, and sometimes we forget about that. So I think all carers, within whatever age they are, they're very, very important, and especially in social care, because it can stop them wanting social care help. And we sometimes forget about that. So it's support for everyone, I think, but obviously within the resources that we've got.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say within the scope and within the recommendations, we see there's quite a lot of focus on working with our partners around promoting services. And I think that's very much about, as Hannah said, there's not one size fits all, and some children and families don't want any support, but then may at a later date decide they do. And it's about ensuring that those adults that are connected to those adults within that household know where to go, as Heather said. So it's about GPs who are treating the adults in the family, health colleagues that are treating adults in the family, the probation service, anybody else that might be working with that family. It has an understanding of the right questions to ask and where to get support if it's needed at any particular time.
I was just going to mention GPs because I actually think they're probably closer to the family than anybody else. And we all know sometimes you get a bit of a blank face, don't you, sometimes when you go to see a GP. I'm not saying all of them, some of them are lovely. But you know what I mean? But they do have a responsibility as everyone else does, because they are sometimes a person who does see a family quite a lot. Not all the time, but at different times in a year. You know what I mean?
And as Hannah said, our schools do a fantastic job.
Oh, yeah, the schools do.
And they know families and will notice if somebody's had a diagnosis or, other things. So one of the things that we ask when a young carer is identified is that we ask them to complete an early help assessment, which is a wonderful way to identify where there's gaps and where there's needs, especially around education, employment training, those sorts of things, and making sure that if we need extra support around that young carer, thinking about so that they aren't disadvantaged by the fact that they are doing this really important for their family.
Okay, Councillor Troy.
Hannah just touched on a little bit of what I was going to say. I mean, obviously, every case is different, isn't it? Every child care is different, the same as adults. Is there a general set of training that you would give that young individual? Just around, I mean, if they're supporting, just around, cooking, cleaning, use of chemicals, use all that type of thing. Because we touched on some of them might be 5 or 6 years old. Now, if they're trying to do that type of stuff, that's obviously quite concerning, isn't it? So, and just going back, is there once we've identified that carer, is there a lead person? Because you talked about all these organisations coming together to help, but in my line of work, with health and safety, so you need a one key person now. Is that from our side, or is that from, how does that fit into it all?
So first part of your question, any specific training? For children and young people who are caring for an adult where they've got physical, medical need, these young people are often provided, or the kids we provide with young carers cards, so they can sit in and have the conversations with the doctors, because often, because their children are left out when they are identified as young people, as young carers, excuse me, they'll go and sit in with the doctors and they can have the conversations about medicines and those sorts of things that they need to be aware of, triggers and all that sort of thing. So that sort of training is provided by the right people when they need that. If we find we have young people who are living in situations that are maybe not that safe, not that it's thinking about how we work with the network around that family, as wide as it may be, to, like I said earlier, try to rebalance so that these children and young people are supporting their family, yes, because it's very important to them and it helps keep their family going, but they're not doing anything inappropriate or unsafe.
I think we just need to be really clear, yeah, that we wouldn't be, if we were aware of 5 and 6 year olds who want to cook and clean and use chemicals, that isn't what we're talking about here.
No, no,
Require a different intervention.
That feeds into the fear around getting people involved, isn't it? Really?
Yes, I guess our message would, yeah, and I guess so that's why we need to be really sensitive about the message, isn't there? If people are aware of children who are needing to do all of that, then they should be letting us know about that. But we would always work with the family and with the family network. We're a family first authority, and I guess I don't want to conflate that with the young carers and the message we want to get out about the young carers, which is about these are not children who were expected to be doing heavy duty caring for the adults in their life. There should be systems in place through adult care, through hospitals, through GPs, through community health to get that done. It's about for a child and you live around that, and you probably are doing a bit more than people who need who have parents without health needs or mental health needs or a whole range of areas. And with regard to is there one named person? Again, that would depend. So it depends on the level of support that's needed, the level of coordination. For some of these young people, all they want is on a Friday at lunchtime, they have a special club at school with other children in school who also have a sibling with a disability, and they'd like to sit and talk to someone else who has that shared experience with them. And that's what they need. And that's where it goes back to where we facilitate from the point of need that we see.
It could be a social worker or an early health worker or just school, or it's and often it's led by the family. So whoever that key person is, if we're intact, it's them saying, actually, we have the closest relationship with school. And then they're that lead professional if that's needed.
Good. Any further contributions? Very good. So recommendations are there on page 87. One is we consider the report, which we have duly done. Then makes arrangements. First A is to indicate which recommendations have been accepted. So all that we're saying, we accept all the recommendations. And B, obviously, having done that, then obviously there'll be an action plan brought forward by scrutiny to actually take it forward and report back at the appropriate time. So all those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much. And with that concludes the meeting. And thank you, everybody, for your.